Hello, welcome to Season 9 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. The theme of this season is 100 Years of Horror. We're going to watch two horror movies from every decade, from 1920 to 2020, in chronological order. We want to see where horror came from, how it's changed, and maybe even make some predictions about where it's going. If you want to see the full list of movies we'll be reviewing this season and follow along, then check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the episode. So, as we continue our journey through 100 Years of Horror, we're doing two horror movies from every decade, from the 20s to the 1920s to the 2020s, and we have now made it out of the 70s and into the 80s. And the movie that we watched this week was The Dead Zone. And I had never heard of this. I did not really look into it ahead of time. But then when it came to time to watch the movie and I saw not only is this based on a Stephen King book, but it stars Christopher Walken. I'm like, how did something this overlapping with my interests stay off my radar my entire life, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. It was kind of the same. I've heard the name The Dead Zone. Like, I've seen that name in a movie, but I had never seen it.
Yeah.
Didn't know anything about it.
Well, it was also directed by David Cronenberg, who directed The Fly.
Yeah.
So not only does he have an interesting take on making horror movies, he also has excellent taste in lead men. That's
a good point, actually. Could you imagine if we had a film with Jeff Goldblum and Christopher Walken?
I would love that.
Let's see if I doubt that's happened. We won't look.
Yeah. It's better not to know if I've been missing out on that all these years.
I know.
But yeah, so Dead Zone, it was... Actually, I'm not going to say anything else. I'm going to introduce it, and then you can do your fun facts, and then we will get into the paranormal details.
Ooh, sounds good.
In 1983, Paramount Pictures brought us The Dead Zone, a movie adaptation of a Stephen King novel of the same name. This film, starring Christopher Walken and directed by David Cronenberg, who also directed The Fly, tells the story of a teacher who develops clairvoyant powers after a car wreck. He then starts using this power to solve crimes past, present, and future. This movie was made on a budget of around $7 million and brought in about $16 million at the box office. It can currently be streamed on Amazon Prime Video at no additional charge to Prime members or to Hulu subscribers.
Very nice. Did you use your app for that?
You mean the app you introduced me to?
Yeah.
Absolutely, I did.
I've used that like 1,000 times. It's called Real Good. We're not
awesome.
Sponsored.
Yet.
But if you do go to Real Good, make sure you use the promo code Horrific Code 10. You get 10% off.
That's a good audition, though. Maybe they'll like it.
Yeah.
So what did you learn about this movie?
I learned a few things about this movie. So, this is obviously based off a Stephen King book. It was his first book to reach number 1 on the best sellers list in parentheses hardcover, because that's a thing. Which, Stephen King's gone on to say that it was one of his most successful books ever. The book was also a total of 428 pages. Just thought I'd tell you that. I'm going to say a name, and I want you to tell me your first thoughts.
Okay.
Ramon Estevez.
Was he one of the motorcycle cops in Chips?
I wish. That's funny. It could have been, I don't know. But that's Martin Sheen's son, right? And he actually was in this film. Just like he was a photographer taking pictures. The reason why I tell you guys this is that I thought that Martin Sheen only had like 2 sons and a daughter, which is Charlie Sheen, Emilio Estevez, and the daughter. I think her name's Rachel or something. Anyway, I looked up this guy, Ramon Estevez, and he's like a mixture of Emilio and Charlie. Like, it's creepy. like his looks. So
I'm into it.
You guys look it up. It's funny. This is a big thing that I've seen over multiple sites talking about with Christopher Walken, how he gives his students, before he has the accident, he gives his students, like his assignment is to read The Headless Demon of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which, fast forward, Christopher Walken plays the Headless Horseman in Sleepy Hollow.
In a different film.
In a different film. However, that could have been the Dead Zone working, and he saw his future.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so there is a scene, one of the scenes where Christopher Walken's doing his thing, and he's like, looking into the future, and he's kind of twitching when he does it. Well, the reason why he's twitching is because they're shooting a 357 that has blanks in it off camera at random times, which made him jump. I don't know why they couldn't just say, hey, jump or twitch.
They wanted his real reaction.
And they had money to spend.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I can think of.
Or just a bunch of extra blanks from a different movie.
That's a good point. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and call it there so we don't go too long with those facts. There were a couple with Bill Murray, but we'll go on with life not knowing those, or you can search them yourself.
All right. So, of the movies that we have watched recently, this was definitely one of the easier ones.
Yeah.
Like, it had a decent budget. It had a story that was relatively easy to follow. And I got the feeling early on that this was going to be much more like Hollywood horror than like Texas Chainsaw horror, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it was also, what's also kind of trippy is that it wasn't like an 8-hour movie about a Stephen King book.
Yeah, but I did feel, so I think it may be a bit of a common theme with Stephen King adaptations is that it feels like they're packing way too many plot points into the time. And so it just kind of like jumps from topic to topic to topic. Mm-hmm. And I don't hate that, but it's also kind of hard to build suspense that way. Like it seems like they have so much ground to cover that you don't really get to like soak in that like horror movie despair that we're looking for, you know?
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, because it was a little strange because it started off with, or like within like 15 minutes, like I think he had his accident.
Yes.
And so it's weird because you get to see the relationship that he had before, but you don't know that much about him. And then next thing you know, like he's seeing the future, or he's seeing, future or whatever of that lady's daughter that's in the burning house. Yeah. And it's just like, wait, what the hell just happened? Like you were just in the accident.
Yeah, it's all very quick.
You were in a coma, but like it was easy because they're jumping around. It's easy to miss things, so like true. You could have easily missed like he was in a coma for however many years, but it does get a little muddied up.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, as far as like horror movies go, because that's what we care about, this one was really like a tale of two halves. Like the first half I thought was really good and really like horror movie. And then the second half just kind of felt like an episode of 24 or something. Like it started off with him getting in the wreck and then getting the powers and realizing what they were. And then he starts investigating the serial killer. And then they go to the house and there's that like super gnarly suicide scene. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, holy crap, where is this going next? Because this has been, it got really intense and dark. And then it's like, okay, then the rest of the movie, it's more just kind of, well, there's a bad politician and I'm saving children and, I don't know. To me, it really lost like the intensity and the things that made it compelling sort of after the beginning part. It didn't really feel to me like there was ever really a lot of suspense or danger or anything after that part.
Yeah, it was kind of confusing to see where it was going with this. So like you knew what he had and I thought like when he like did the interview with the papers or whatever, I thought that was like the issue was going to be like with too many people, like too many citizens coming up and trying to get their future, just all that, mm-hmm. and seeing like the true human the human nature, like people being
Yeah.
evil and stuff. But it definitely took a turn for, where it was going after the politician, which I just assume was also like an obvious political statement,
Oh yeah.
I will say, like, do I consider this a horror? Not necessarily. I would consider it more like a thriller in a way, but also like I still like really enjoyed this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I liked it a lot in the first half, and then the second half, I never was tempted to turn it off, which puts it above the last couple that we've watched.
Yeah, no kidding.
But, and one thing I liked a lot was, like, that scene where he has the vision of the girl's, like, last memories before the serial killer, and he's able, like, Cotter, and he's able to, say, like, kind of what was going on in the scene and stuff. And it's like, oh, it's somebody that she knows and everything. And I really wish they could have drawn that out a bit more, like his investigation or his trying to like learn from these flashbacks that he's getting, like where the killer is or how they can trap him or track him down or whatever. So the fact that was just kind of rushed, and then they got on to what was kind of the more main storyline of dealing with the politician, kind of made me sad. In looking back at it, it felt like it was setting up for a more horror type feel in the movie. But then, like you said, it definitely transitioned to more kind of mystery thriller type stuff.
Yeah, I think it was definitely missed opportunity, because that's the scene that you're talking about with where he's at the gazebo and the killer's calling her over. Like, that was a legit good scene. Like when it was happening, it was just like it was kind of intense. Like, he couldn't see the guy's face, even though it was kind of confusing why he couldn't see him. But I assumed it maybe because she hadn't seen him yet, or I don't know. But it was just weird, and it was just building the tension, which I get. But that scene was like hands down one of the best. And then, like you said, it does go into the whole politician. He's tutoring students, kind of moving on with his life, and shakes the hand of a politician and sees the bad things that's fixing to happen by Martin Sheen, and who I thought played like a really good psychopath.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now with the filming of this, like, I have this weird like comfort zone when it comes to like movies that are like, they seem rainy and they're kind of like not high def, and it like kind of takes me back to my childhood. Like
kind of the muted colors, almost like a TV movie or something.
Yeah. I have like this like love for that, that type of film. And so that may have been why I was like, why I enjoyed it as much as I did. But like, I don't think that was on purpose. They were probably just doing with the best with what they had, but it worked out for me. Like it's an age film, and it's okay to watch an age film, especially if it's, has some good writing in it too,
Yeah. And that, I think, is always going to be one of the stronger points of a movie based on a Stephen King work, is that it's going to be like a really elaborate, well-written storyline. And so even if some of the execution of the filming or the acting or anything isn't like super on point, the story still keeps you engaged. And so, like, this was by no means a perfect movie from the movie making perspective. Like, I would assume that it was just bad, like, miking of the scenes, but there was some absolutely unintelligible dialogue in this one. And it was really funny to me because at first I was like, am I just going deaf? Like, what is happening? But I would go back and rewatch the scenes, and then I put subtitles on, and I was like, okay, the thing in the subtitle is 1000% not what just came out of that person's mouth. But like when the mom sees Johnny on the TV being interviewed, like early on when he's getting out of the hospital, and she's like, "Oh, John, no." And I'm like, what now? But I went back and rewatched it. And no, that's just what she said. She was just like, "Oh." And then when he decides that he's going to help the sheriff, he's like, "I'm going to do it. I'm going to help him." Oh, I'm like, what? But that's just what it was. And so I assume that the way that they mic'd the set or the actors was just like not direct on how the sound was coming from the voice or something, and it just didn't pick it up at all.
Yeah.
But those moments were like very confusing to me because, you know, like you said, it was a pretty fast moving movie and it changed scenes a lot and stuff happened a lot. And so when you were missing bits of dialogue, that only made it seem even more abrupt.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that, you know, miking something, a scene could take a huge effect on the film itself. Because if you think about it, if, you know, what you run into with films that I think are, you know, this happens to relatively frequent, what all they do is just dub over the audio, which then like kind of, if it's not mixed right, you can't, I feel like it makes scenes worse. If you could tell it's
especially if it's
dub.
off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or like they're talking normal, and then all of a sudden it's like super loud or super crisp, you know, and it's like, oh shoot, they edited something out. Now, like I was kind of saying earlier, though, even though I didn't necessarily consider this too much of a horror film, there were scenes in it that definitely kind of like tripped me out, which were, you know, the one that we were talking about with the girl at the gazebo, but even continuing on with that story of the serial killer, when they find out that it's the deputy, the way that he kills himself.
Yeah.
It's just
I was so glad you didn't see any more of that than you did.
100%.
But even just like the setup for it made my skin crawl. That was so dark and so intense.
Yeah. I mean, because you're thinking like that, it makes sense though, because you have the psychopath who's killing people, and like his way of killing himself is just gonna be like slamming his head to the scissors, and you're like, you could easily take those scissors and like, you know, cut your wrists or something, or turn yourself in, but that's boring. But, yeah, it was just, like that was pretty horrific in my opinion. Like that whole murder or death scene, like the whole situation is effed up, but, the way that he killed himself was just like, holy shnikes.
And that was just such a tone shift too, at that point in the movie.
Yeah.
Cause things had been kind of more like moody and like, you know, creepy, up until that point. And then that happened, and it was just this like huge crescendo of horror. And I was like, oh my God, if they're doing that this early, what are we in store for next? And then it never really kind of recaptured that same thing, but it certainly got my attention when it happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. They did a good job with that.
So going back to sound, one bit of dialogue I did get that I loved was when he was talking to the rich guy, and he first gets over there to like meet the kid. He's like, you want a drink? He's like, no. It's like, don't want a beer? And he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like he thought he was only being offered Dr. Pepper, and he's like, no, I'm fine. And he's like, how about a beer? Oh, I mean, I could drink.
Yeah.
But yeah, another thing that bothered me on this one was the way, and I would bet that it seemed a lot more organic in the book, but the way that his ex just kept showing up at points that were convenient to the plot was really annoying to me.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like it seemed very forced.
Yeah, where I mean, I think that's things that you run into when you make a film off a book. You miss like I'm sure in the book there were more times when she showed up instead of that, but yeah, you just knew like anytime she showed up, like okay, well something's gonna be tied to the plot, you know, or like convenient here.
I mean, it was just weird. That was weird, and then the fact that like, and again, this is probably Stephen King's fault, not the writers or makers of this movie, but the idea that the politician like ended up holding her baby up as a shield, and that was like the climax of the thing. Like, I don't know, that just seemed ridiculously stupid to me, and I bet it was probably a lot less awkward in the book, but in the way that was just kind of like pulled off in the movie, I was like, really? You expect me to believe this is how it would go down? Okay.
It did feel like super awkward and forced almost. However, and one of the reasons why I like horror films or horror movies and what I think makes them horror is if the problem is still there when it ends. Now with this film, they couldn't do that. They had to get, you know, Martin Sheen had to lose, but it did make me feel good that he still lost even though he didn't die. Or he didn't die. Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't get to become president and blow up the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of wish, I don't know. With movies where I feel like they miss the mark on horror, I always try to think like, how could they have done it differently? And with this one, I think what it did well was, like we were talking about in the beginning, where he's like investigating the serial killer and he's having to like experience these memories that involve, him like stalking and killing people and stuff. And I think they could have gone further in that direction with it. Like maybe he's helping out the police, but then, there's one killer that he can't seem to catch, but he keeps having to like relive the flashbacks of it or whatever, or like the experience of being in the killer's mind or something. Like I could see that turning into something kind of like dark and cool from a horror perspective. Yeah. But yeah, I get, that's just not what this movie was trying to be.
There were definitely a lot of missed opportunities. 100%. I like the idea of like the serial killer. Well, you're thinking like a serial killer is the one chasing him now that he knows about what's going on, but like all that dude has to do is shake a hand and he can see the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And one thing too, they had mentioned the idea of like the dead zone or like the dark parts that in the memories where he couldn't see what was happening. And I kind of thought maybe that was like a setup for the thing he didn't see was the guy that was gonna like shoot him after he did something. Mm-hmm. Or even like maybe he starts using this like foresight to go like commit crimes or something. Like
that'd be cool.
Yeah. I mean, just and again, like this is based on a really successful book. So they obviously probably didn't have a whole lot of room to improvise, but I think there were a lot of promising elements that could have led to a good horror movie, but it was a decent movie. It was not a great horror movie, I guess is my final point on it.
I can see that. Yeah. My final point is it's same thing you just said, actually. I was just going to repeat it. I liked it as an actual film, but I wouldn't consider it one of the greatest horror films of all time.
What I think is I think of it as a horror film personally, just because I think it's like mentally horrific, like the intensity and the darkness of it. But have you seen The Deer Hunter?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was one where I was like, that isn't technically a horror movie, but that was still darker and more horrific than this one for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but I feel like that's more terrifying because you can relate that to like how crazy Vietnam was.
Well, yeah,
with
and
this
just
one,
like what it turned people, like what people can turn into after like being in that type of situation and stuff.
And
like,
this one, we don't really have that. We can't necessarily relate that much because there's no real psychic out there.
Well, you don't.
There's not. You ever heard of the $1 Million Challenge?
I have not.
Figured. I knew you were going to say that. I won't get into it because I don't want to hear the clicker. But overall, I like the film.
Yeah, glad we watched it.
Not the worst. But it also could have been because we had a couple shit shows. You know what I mean?
No, for sure. And, it wasn't like this movie was wildly successful at the time.
Yeah.
But I don't know that a lot of Stephen King movies were. Like going back and revisiting some of those from like the 70s and 80s or I guess 80s and 90s more so, like they didn't really have a lot of budget behind them. And I think a lot of them had good, obviously stories at the root, but the execution was not great. And I thought it was fine on this one as far as like the movie making and acting.
Yeah, I did not turn this off frustrated.
Yeah.
So it was a win. And we got Christopher Walken. Oh my gosh.
Man, his hair in the beginning.
Amazing.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah. Amazing.
On point. Yeah. So anyway, that's what we got for this week. We will be back next time and look forward to talking with you all then. And by you all, I just mean you, because I'm pretty sure we're the only two that ever hear these conversations. But
That's safe.
If there's anyone else out there, please subscribe to the podcast. And you can also follow us on Facebook, and you can message us on Facebook, and you can email us at thehorrificpod@gmail.com. And we have a website that is thehorrific.com, and it has information about the podcast, but also some short horror stories if you are so inclined.
We got it all.
We even have a discount code with...
It's changed actually since on the podcast. So it's now wings, #10. And that's for Real Good, the app where you can search for any film and it'll tell you if it's on Netflix or Hulu. Just like I said, it's Wangers, #10. That's the promo code.
For the free app, 10% off.
Yep. 10% off the free app.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.